Long Beach. But now I'm in the OC. Anybody who's in California or who's familiar with California, we're in the southern part of California where it's always sunny, but this week it's been raining. And I think, like Ryan said, I was a former immigration services officer with USCIS, where I adjudicated O's and P's. And upon leaving the service, I fell into EB1s because they're very similar to O1As. So the regulations are pretty much the same. They're just obviously way more strict in AB1s, and they look at a lot of different things in AB1s other than the criteria as well. So there's a lot of little things, nuances that are differences between EB1 and O1. But since I'm so familiar, as a former insider, the familiarity of EB1s, it just kind of like fell natural for me, and they just kind of like fell on my lap to be able to understand them and get through an officer's head. Which is kind of like the main thing that you're trying to look at is how is this person looking at my case, and what's going to make them like my case, actually. So there are a few things that I will be discussing throughout about that.
Absolutely. Thank you for it.
So we're definitely going to be discussing, like, what do officers like? What do officers don't like? Between the O1, the EB1, we'll briefly discuss day one CPT, and then we will have a little bit of my stance and my observations on how to effectively lower your RFE chances.
Absolutely.
So an O1A, this is the kind of things that I would look at normally, O1As and O1Bs. But today we're going to talk about the O1A, how there needs to be a sponsor here. So if there's a sponsor, let's say Microsoft, let's say Amazon, they will be the ones sponsoring your O1A. Or, if you're in the science field too, a university could be, requesting your services for an O1A. Those are the common ones that I've seen. There's athletics too. I had that opportunity to work with an athlete this year who's a coach from Japan, and we did an O1A for her. So, but these are normally the fields like science, education, business, or athletics, where you also show that you have extraordinary ability by fulfilling 8 criteria. So the 8 criteria here, we can go to the next slide. When we're talking about 8 criteria, it's just that these are one of the core differences between O1A and EB1, is that there's 8 criteria here in the O1A world, and there's 10 criteria in the EB1 world. So here, the 8 criteria are more or less the same as an EB1, where they have awards. And awards, I like to call it a 3-part rule, because number 1, you have to show an actual award. Number 2, you have to show that the award is related to your field. Number 3, you have to show that this award is internationally and nationally recognized. Just as well as membership is one of those popular things to go for depending on your field. Membership, even with athletes though, and even within the science and the business field, it is a very popular category to go for. Especially judging the work of others is also one that kind of transcends all the fields here, whether it be athletics, whether it be science, whether it be business. It's one of those things. Authorship is one of scholarly journals. It's a very popular one among people with PhDs. Published material is popular amongst business and amongst people in athletics. Celebrities, they tend to have a lot of published material about them, which is like, you can kind of put a synonym to their media, their press. They have a lot of press. And there's a lot of different nuances to that too with published material, because some officers will like it when they talk about you in a gossipy way about your life, and they'll be okay with that. And some officers will be like, writing about your personal life does not talk about your work that you're doing in the field. So there are different officers who have different stances on the published material portion of this category. They will either, like, and it's very popular among athletes and very popular among, celebrities, when they'll be like, oh, well, it's not talking about any work that you did, like particularly that shows that you're at the top of your field. It's just talking about your personal life. And that tends to happen with some athletes. And so those are like the very popular things. Employment in a critical capacity also is a very popular with business. It's very popular with business. And high salary as well. It kind of transcends all, like athletics, business, science. If you're someone who has a high salary, and usually what they're looking for and what they want to see is top 10% of your field. But if you are top 10% in your field and there's no data out there in research to prove like some kind of comparison statistic, then you're kind of like in a bad position to argue that. And that tends to happen a lot with foreign clients, where let's take a country like Pakistan or something. There isn't a lot of statistics to prove that maybe this person in this country makes a high salary comparing it to what it was if there's a lot of comparison statistics. So it's the same thing for EB1. So we can move on to EB1.
Yes, before we touch down EB1, I do have a question, because we sometimes communicate with some clients or some students that when they're applying for H1Bs, because H1B have its own salary requirements. I know that O1 might have different requirements, but does working remotely count in terms of the salary? Maybe this salaries, average salaries in this location is different than the other location, but I'm located in a different city.
I do it all the time, actually. I take what looks better, I guess you can say, but most of the time, most of my clients are on H1B. Actually, they're currently on that status, and they're going for an EB1 or they're going for an O1. And what I do is, when I look up comparison statistics, I look at the regional comparison statistics, and I look at the national comparison statistics. And sometimes I have argued the regional ones, because sometimes they make a high salary in whatever state that they're in, because a lot of these big companies like Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, who else do I have in another big company? Other big companies that I have clients in my roster for, they all work remotely in different states. Texas, Utah, Georgia. I was just working on one where he lives in Georgia, and they all work remotely. So it actually kind of works in their favor when they're in other states, because sometimes in other states, the comparison statistic is lower on what to make and what's in that top 10%, and they are making that threshold as an H1B.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
So first preference category, it's one of, I would say, one of the hardest visa classifications to obtain, the EB1A. I think aside from, I guess, asylum cases that drag on for years and years. I don't do asylum cases, but I have lots of friends who do, immigration attorneys who do them, and they're just such a dragged out process. This is very, very difficult to obtain. It's very difficult to show that you have extraordinary ability, because there's so many intricacies and so many complications with the law. But it's not impossible. Not impossible. Definitely not impossible. I've had people work on their profile and I've gotten them approved. So, if this is a category that you would want to someday strive for, I say you go for it, because it's only going to better yourself, to be at the top of your field. So It is very much the same. Even the memberships, everything is pretty much the same. I think that memberships, I think, like I mentioned earlier, and I love talking about memberships because there are a lot of people who have memberships, but what if that organization doesn't have a bylaw and article association talking about required outstanding achievements? Or you can't obtain the names of the people who selected you because they're very particular about that. So we have to figure out ways for that membership to work if it's such a prestigious membership. Judging the work of others is always very, very popular. And it's an easy one to meet. And I think that if you have a PhD, it's very easy for you to meet judging the work of others and authorship, because it's really part of the nature of your field to write scholarly articles, to peer review journals. That's a common thing that really comes across in their in their profile. They do a lot of that stuff. And I always tell people, don't say no. Don't say no. Like even today, even the hardest one to meet, though, out of all of these 10 is original contributions. It gets RFE'd so much. And I have I have a particular way of approaching it, and to try to simplify it for my clients is, did you create something? It's not that your work is benefiting the field, is did you create something that has a wide implementation in the field? How do we prove that? Is there a lot of public commentary about it? Do you have a patent with your name on it to show that it's related to your field? It's not all about expert opinion letters, just saying a bunch of language with no backing to it. And the policy manual is very clear on that for EB1, that you can't just say things just for the sake of saying things. You have to say who's applying it in the field and how your size of your field matters. Like, who are the major players in your field? Who are they? Are they using this particular technology you came up with? And it's hard, to go into this whole intricacy of, like, you fall into a rabbit hole of research. You can't write a letter without having research about it. That's why I am a very anti letters of recommendation person. There's a difference between expert opinions, letters of support, and experience letters. And they get you on this one in EB1 more than what they do in an O1 is those experience letters to show that you have a critical role. Those are the ones that really really show you if your work is, or if you're acting, or if you're working in a critical or leading capacity. They have to be very detailed. And whoever's in leadership within your company has to endorse those letters to show that you're critical, to show that you're in a leading capacity in the organization. And the easy part is proving whether it's distinguished. But really honing in on that language that they're looking for is what officers want to see. They want to see that you're working in a critical and leading capacity, and they want those details. They don't just want like a general job description. You have to just ask yourself, what I do, how is it affecting the whole company? And if you come up with some sort of something, I have engineers that come up with some amazing things for their companies, that make them run more efficiently. And those are the things you need to showcase within those letters. So we can, and those are one of the differences too. I think commercial success, those are for people in the arts. So we can move on to NIW. Yeah, NIW. I get a lot of these RFE evaluations for NIW, and it's very general. on how it says, the proposed endeavor has both substantial merit and national importance. You are well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor. On balance, it would be beneficial to the United States to waive the requirements of the job offer and this the labor certification. So I like to call that something to be fluid, just because one of the ways to show that you're well positioned is kind of like you're following the AB1 criteria. Excuse me, have you ever judged the work of others? If you have judged the work of others, it shows that you're an expert. It means that you're well positioned to do what you are planning here to do. But one of the core differences is, in NIW, you can show that a membership is professional, but they're not asking you whether it requires outstanding achievements. So that's part of the thing that's why I call it a little bit more flexible, just because whatever you're a member of, you don't have to prove anything else than besides that this membership shows that you are in, amongst a group of people that are related to your field. So that's why I like to call it a little bit flexible. But you really do have to have a clear idea of what you are planning to do here in that proposed endeavor. They really do get people on that, the proposed endeavor. What are you coming here to do? Tell us. Write a statement. Have some backing to back up that statement. People who are interested in your work. That's basically what that case is about. The dinosaur is, are people interested in your work? Are there people willing to take you on, willing to hire you? You have to show some sort of, even though it's not, you don't have to have confirmed work, but are people interested in it? So it becomes a little bit hard there.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go to the other slide. So what do people in general, what do they need for EB2 and a W?
For EB2 and a W, I mean, you have to show that you have a degree. That's part of it, which is part of the easy part for most people, is to show that, that there is a great pool of applicants with bachelor's and master's degrees, who can get their academic records, letters from employers. I think that those are very easy things to get, because most people who are even thinking about this have been working in the field. They have certifications or within their professions, that hone in on their area of expertise. And that's always what I say. First thing when I get an EB2, and I, even an EB2 or an EB1 or an O1 is what is your exact area of expertise? And sometimes you kind of hone in on that with those licenses or their certifications. You hone in on those areas of expertise. You get these certifications and you pass these exams that show that you're an expert in your field. Whether let's say you're a software developer, but you're certified in something specific within that software developing, that's kind of how you showcase an area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a questions in terms of the letters from the former employers. Does it have to be an U.S. employer for that?
No, it doesn't have to be a U.S. employer. The thing is, it just can't be. I'm a big person on letterhead. I need letterhead. So if you've worked at another company in your home country, it needs to have a letterhead from your home country. Letterhead from that particular company where you worked, employment verification letters to back up that you worked from there from 1 year till 5 years later, showing that letterhead that you worked there. It can't just be these plain letters. It gives it a lot of substance when there's letterhead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, going to the other slide. What's the difference between, I think a lot of people want to know, what's the difference between EB1 and NW?
Like I said earlier, and I'm going to say it again, because I think that a lot of people have, they need repetitiveness to learn. And I repeat myself a lot for that reason. That's my style, where I say things in a different way to make sure people understand. Is degrees matter for NIW, and for EB1 they don't. It doesn't matter whether you have a bachelor's degree, whether you have a PhD, whether you have nothing, but you have an area of expertise that didn't require degrees, like, you know, a celebrity, they don't matter in EB1. One of my clients who got approved in August, he's a performance testing engineer, you know, was like, he was a performance testing engineer, and I think he didn't have a master's degree. And, you know, there was this misconception out there that you needed to have a master's degree to get the opportunity to do an EB1, but that's not true. You know, that's not true. You don't need those degrees in EB1. They are helpful if you have a PhD, because if you are peer reviewing journal scholarly articles and authoring them, then it gives you an advantage for 2 criteria. You know, because you have to, for O1 and EB1, you only have to, you know, submit 3. I like to up my chances on approval, and I like to do 5. But if you have those two, I mean, it's very helpful for your case to have 2 as well when you have a PhD. And you know, the factors are very much flexible to NIW, because, you know, if you have a business and you show that you're well positioned to do it, there are many different types of ways to do that. You're not like stringent, like you're not attached to these 10 criteria like EB1. That's why I like to say that it's flexible, because you know, what if, you know, what you have as far as your background doesn't fit the EB1 mold? Because with EB1, you have to mold yourself to them. You have to mold yourself to the type of evidence that they're looking for. Like how I said, memberships requires outstanding achievements through a bylaw or through an article of association. And number 3, you have to show that the the people who selected you to be a member were experts in the field. You're not attached to those like strict little things under an IW. You know, that's why it's very flexible. So that's why I said you have to, there's something called plain language. You have to address every part of the rule to even make it to EB1. But with NIW, you can just use, you know, whatever is in your field. So those are like the core differences. The O1A obviously needs a sponsor. You can self-petition for an EB1, meaning you are not attached to an employer like an H1B or an O1. But the difference is there has to still be a statement of like there's something called intent and substantially benefit the United States in an EB1. So you still have to have a statement of intent. So sometimes for people in business, they actually, you know, come up with a business plan of the kind of business they want to start in the United States. So if that's very detailed, then you do that. And then, you know, it's independent research showing that you're going to substantially benefit the United States as well. So there's a little bit of an intricacy there, because you don't have to show that for an O1 because you have a sponsor. And there's also another difference in the O1A is that you need to have an advisory opinion, which is called the consultation letter. For my athletes and for the people who are celebrities, it's easy for them to obtain that letter because there are organizations out there. You know, for example, you know, people who are, let me think of an athlete. The athlete that I recently did, she was a badminton player. And there is a badminton organization where you get the letter from them saying that they are okay with that person working in the United States. So that's kind of easy for athletes. For people in like the business and the science, it's a little bit difficult, because if you know that if you don't match that list that they're looking for on the website, the USCIS website, then if you don't have that, then you have to find somebody in your field who's an expert. And then you write a letter highlighting all of your accomplishments. And for the criteria for between O1A and EB1, artistic exhibitions and showcase doesn't exist for an O1A. And so there's some differences in the law. There's 2 different criteria that are different.
All right. I think we're pretty clear in terms of EB1, EB2 and O1s. Now let's jump into day 1 CPT.
Okay, so day 1 CPT, I like this little chart here. I like this little chart. It really kind of gives you an idea of what the Department of Homeland Security looks like, because it's so broad. There's so many different units, there's CUP, there's ICE, there's USCIS. There's a lot of different departments within USCIS, and CPT is also one of those things that you can get as an F1 student. So I normally don't work with students. I'm just aware of this from colleagues and stuff like that, where you are allowed to do some sort of work study, and it's usually curricular practical training. So it's kind of like an alternative thing that you could do while you're here. So I think we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, and in terms of day 1 CPT, I also wanted to add, besides of the regular CPT, which a lot of students already know that they could wait for a semester or a year until the university authorized them to do CPT. Day 1 CPT is actually an exception, so that a waiver to that 1 academic year requirements that the program require you to start participating in curriculum practical training, to start working. That is a part of the program that you need that kind of experience. So that's why, this is the reference from ICE, and that's why, ICE, kind of allows day 1 CPT as one of the exceptions. And moving on to the next slides, who's eligible?
So generally, who's eligible is international students are eligible. The visa hold, the spouses, F2, H4 for H1Bs, H1B holders who got laid off too. That's been a popular one, actually. It has been, especially in the tech industry, and I have a lot of clients in the tech industry. So that's why they try to go for EB1, because of all these layoffs that are happening right now. And so you can always, depending on your profile, you can look into EB1 if you've gotten laid off.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these, subjects that we present, EB1, EB2, O1, day 1 CPT, these are just, options out there that if you are in any of these situations, you might be eligible. Maybe not, EB1, because EB1 is kind of at the higher top, but for example, international students, spouses, H1B holders, those are also might be eligible for O1 or day 1 CPT, judging from what they want to do in the US. So I think one of the other part that we really want to mention is that, judging from your experience working from USCIS, people wanted to know, how do you avoid RFEs, or how do you kind of avoid effectively lower the risk of RFE or ID and stuff like that?
So my stance on that is, make your petition easy for an officer to read. If you are going to use representation, make sure that you're giving all the evidence, that you're working well with your attorney as well. I get a lot of wonderful clients, like wonderful superstars, that I ask them to do something and they have it all set up and organized in a Google Drive, and this is awards, this is my membership, this is my high salary, and they have everything set up so perfectly. So number one, like make the life easy of it. It's the same thing with an officer as well. You have to put a presentable application, and you have to be eligible. There's a lot of people who think that they can do this without an attorney. Tons of people who think that they can do this without an attorney, and those are the ones who come to me for evaluation when they get all these heavy RFEs. So that's why I said you have to be eligible. Don't go for categories that you don't qualify for. If you've received an academic scholarship and you're trying to make that as an award, it's not going to happen. You're going to get an RFE about it. Let's say that you've done a judging the work of others and it doesn't relate to your field. There are two components to judging the work of others. Number one, you're showing that you've judged, that you've evaluated, you peer reviewed, you were at an awards, and you were the judge. Number one, that's part of it. But if you're a scientist and you judge the beauty pageant, that is not going to work. Those are two different things. Or what if you're a science person, or you play a sport as well and you judge people, like that's not going to work. But people make those mistakes. They think that they're just going to throw everything under the sun. They can throw everything under the sun and it's going to work. And I've seen that happen time and time again, especially with membership. Membership is, oh, but I'm a part of this committee and this society. Well, it's pretty common that they RFE committee members. If you're a committee member in a scholarly conference, that doesn't work as well. They don't that's not considered a membership of an association. It just means you're a committee member within the organization, but you're not in a professional organization. They call that very different. And that's why I pick on membership a lot, because those words like committee member, that's not considered a membership. They RFE for people like that. It's if you're in a professional association, and whether that required outstanding achievements. And so if you're missing that kind of evidence, of course you're going to get an RFE. And if you're not labeling your evidence, and this is why I'm not a proponent of people who do these long, draining cover letters, 200-page cover letters explaining, all these legal arguments. It's these people have a short attention span. They're looking at things like, are you matching evidence to regulation? Regulation and then evidence. Is it matching? Is it matching? Are you setting up your petition in a way that's confusing? And, are you looking at what the regulations are? And are you addressing every part of the regulations? Are you addressing, number one, that you're a judge? Are you addressing that this is related to your field? If you're a member, if you have an award, are you proving that it's nationally, internationally recognized? Did you get the criteria for that award from the issuing organization? Did you get their criteria? Do you know if that organization reaches to the level of national, international recognition, showing that it's very distinguished? Does this particular organization have a bunch of awards attached to it to show that it's distinguished? There's a lot of previous winners as well. Does it have a lot of previous winners to show? Are you showing independent evidence to show, hey, look at this award has all these very elite previous winners? So it shows that you're kind of comparing yourself to these previous winners to show that there's national, international acclaim attached to this award that you got. So it's kind of incomplete evidence is what gets most people. And that's why you need to avoid those things, or you think that this is, I get a lot of those that think that, well, I read the law and it seemed very simple to me. And, I did my research, but, you don't know the nuances of what they like, and they don't want to pay an attorney, or it's just, they don't have enough money, or or they don't want to get some advice on how to do it, which I'm thinking about trying to do an alternative, maybe creating a video series on how to do a petition, considering it. But it's sometimes I meet with people one-on-one too, like on an hourly basis as well, to, you know, show them how it works and what evidence works there, you know. So we're that's in the works. And I do normally do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we sort of touched on that during our conversation, is that people trying to file on themselves, and they got an RFE and they're seeking for help, but it's kind of late. If they wanted to turn into somebody earlier, that would be much easier in that situation.
Yeah, and I tell people very straightforward, either you have a chance or you don't. Some people mess up their case so bad that they don't have a chance. And then there's people that I'm like, oh no, you can save this.
And that will be on the no ID cases.
Hmm? For both NIW and EB1, I've gotten both of those. Okay. Where I'm like, okay, you can save this, or number two, like I'll be like, no, you can't save this. Like, this is, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, and you know, I think you need to refile. Everybody's different. And that's the thing that I always say about these cases. These are not cookie cutter. They're not like a regular EB2, where it's like you just do a checklist and you know, you get approved. It's everybody's evidence is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all of our presentation, and we want to go into Q&A sections. And before we go into Q&A sessions, I do want to address to everybody that Jocabed does practice on EB1s, EB2s, O1s. So she would not be answering your H1B questions, because we don't want to get that information incorrectly. So she would not answer, you know, how do I file for an H1B? What is H1B? We wouldn't answer these kind of questions today, because we are, you know, aiming for the subjects of telling people what could you do, what options do you have if you couldn't get selected in the H1B lotteries. And in terms of the day one CPT field, I think I will be the one to answer everybody's questions to make things clear, because we work with a lot of schools as well as immigration attorneys. So I will be taking over your day one CPT questions just to make sure. So all right, let's go into the questions. First one is, what is it?
I don't do perms. NIW, they waive the perm. Like, that process is not like what we do. I mainly do like self petitions, like NIW and EB1. Like, this is the advice. So I don't do perm. So question one is not something I'm going to answer.
Sure, let's go to the other questions. For college professors, you know, without a lot of publications or citations, is there any hope for EB1? Or yes, can you kind of explain on that situations?
There is. I mean, EB2 is never a bad thing. It depends. I mean, if you're from China and from India, you're probably going to have to wait a long time under the EB2 line. So if you want to do an EB1, you don't have to have a lot of citations. There is no magic number for citations. But if you do have the thing that you're going to fulfill, if you have some level of that, is authorship. Because if you have citations, that means you're authoring scholarly articles. So I like to teach people that there's a difference, obviously, in the language, and when you say publications, in USCIS don't use that lingo. It's, you're an author of scholarly articles. And you apparently, if you're a business major and you have some sort of, if you're even in the business category and you're writing scholarly articles for business journals, you can apply for an EB1, but you would also need to work on other things in your profile, like maybe peer reviewing at award ceremonies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we did mention that we're not answering perm questions. So the other one, can people work for business roles apply for any of these I'm not sure whether this person mean by business roles. I'm assuming like a manager or having a business. You know, and he also mentioned that it seems to be hard for corporate strategy program manager. So these type of jobs, could they apply for any of these?
Well, I just got a product manager approved last week. So
And
it's
for
like,
which
yeah,
category?
for business. Yeah, he's a product manager. He was a product manager, which is kind of like a little bit like a program manager. They're kind of like, that's like the new big title for people in this field is product manager. But I also have someone who's multi-skilled, who's a product program, and she's been a program manager for like 20 years. And now her new title has evolved to product manager. So the main thing about O1 and EB1 is when you're a product or a program manager, you have to show that you're critical to the company as a whole, and whether the company that you're working for has distinguished reputation. So you can apply for O1 and EB1 as a program manager, as a product manager. I got somebody approved who in July who was in marketing. So it's definitely feasible. It just really depends on the quality of the evidence.
Okay. Next question. If I'm a F1 student, I'm under F1 visa, and I get 1 million investment from VC, can I use this as a material to apply for EB1?
No. It doesn't match any of the criteria, it appears, for an EB1. Getting an investment, a lot of people like to use investments as awards, but they don't qualify as awards because you can't prove that an investment is internationally, nationally recognized.
Sure, absolutely. But however, if I do want to ask, if a F1 student is an entrepreneur at the same time,
They can go for E2.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And regarding letters of recommendation, moving on to the next question. What if the former colleague is now working in another firm, another company that couldn't write the letterhead?
Okay, so what I've been doing for my clients is we have to still show proof that the person worked there. If you're trying to get a letter from that person, an experience letter, I don't like to call them letters of recommendation. But an experience letter, if that person has like a LinkedIn profile that shows proof that they work there, then that would work.
This evidence shows that they have previous history working for that company. That will work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you also mentioned that letterhead will always be preferable if they do work. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's preferable.
All right. Next question is that will enrolling in day one CPT hurt my future applications such as L1, O1, EB1s? I think we did work with students who are under day one CPT and is going to apply for these visas. And I think the way you look at day one CPT is not just CPT, is a F1 visa. Is under F1 visa, you are a F1 student. So it's not that if you go to certain schools, your other applications will get rejected, but whether or not you are remaining as an F1 student, you are following all the F1 student duties and being an F1 student that requires you to study full time, that requires you to attend on-campus sessions every time whatever the school requires. So these kind of doing homework, maintain your GPA. So being a day one CPT or F1 students is not going to hurt your immigration applications. But if you have certain spots where they think is suspicious, why are you not doing certain things that you are asked to, and then it will kind of affect your further immigration applications in that way. And I do know you don't practice EB3, but this person want to ask your thoughts on EB3 if possible.
I don't really have thoughts on EB3.
Sure. Next question. I think we answered this one already, and what is bad about
Filing.
refiling?
Mhm.
Say, have ERFE rejected or withdrawn EB1, decide to refile, how could it be affected from the first one?
It won't affect you.
Did you work with these kind of situations before where somebody
Oh
got
yeah.
rejected?
Mhm.
Could you
Yeah.
could you explain that a little
Yeah,
bit?
actually last year it wasn't my case. I was working on another firm, and I think that this was like the second or third time this person refiled, and I think when I refiled her case, I reorganized it, and I did it the way I would prefer to look at cases when I was an officer, and that person got approved on like day 10 of like premium processing.
Hey,
Mhm.
next question. Could we self-sponsor for O1 by any chance?
No, you can't.
What
Yeah.
are the categories that people can self-sponsor or self-petition?
NIW and EB1.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, O1, it's not really possible.
this one, we answered this. So this person said, I am pursuing a PhD and I only have 1 year visa.
Hmm.
Uh, if it expired, could I apply for NIW and get a I-140 approved? Can I extend my visa, and stay in the US if he does apply for NIW?
Um, yeah, you just have to maintain your status. Like, if you're on F1, we'll continue to take classes.
Sure. And then, if you're pursuing this certain degree that is gonna finish, you can also transfer to another school and maintain the F1 visa status to complete your other visa application.
Mm-hmm.
Can you apply for day one CPT only after your H1B application is denied? I think you absolutely can, because when your H1B application is denied, you do have a certain time if your previous visa is valid in that case. For example, if you were previously a OPT students, you are a F1 students, as long as your previous status is valid, you can apply for day one CPT and transfer to the other school. Next question, in terms of letters of experiences, from the other previous questions, you said that one's LinkedIn profile can count as a proof, like, how can people provide that file or LinkedIn profile to the
Well,
USCIS?
LinkedIn profiles are public. You just have to go on their profile, and LinkedIn actually provides you with the PDF with it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another question is, this person is asking something rather more general. What do you think is the best way for occupational therapist for 5 years of experience to get sponsored? And it doesn't mention that what kind of sponsor that is, but I have a OT doctoral, no PhD. So what type of, those options that we
I,
mentioned
I
before?
I don't help people get jobs, so I don't know how to people get obtain sponsors. You need to already come with a sponsor.
Yeah, if you mention if sponsorship means H1B, then this could be a very specific questions. But in terms of EB1, EB2, NIW or O1s, do you think a occupational therapist could apply for any one of these one?
Well, I don't know exactly what occupational therapists do to have an opinion on that.
Yeah,
They haven't came across for me in my practice to know exactly what they do.
sure. This person wanted to ask, stand OPT 3 years, not selected, company sent to foreign. Oh, this is an L1 questions.
Oh yeah, I don't really know
We
about
don't
all
we
this.
don't really want to comment at L1 because neither of our sides, practice L1, so we wouldn't answer this question as well. So I think for now on, we're good on, the questions part. If you wanted to apply to any of these type of categories and you think after this presentation, you do feel like you're eligible for EB1, O1, EB2, and NW, feel free to scan our QR code and we can connect you to Jocabed. And if you think you are interested in day one CPT, you can connect with us so we can further guide you through free consultations. And we do have a new question coming in. This is a questions that people ask. What if I submit something wrong, something fake? Well, USCIS check all the documents. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, that's fraud. It's pretty obvious.
We don't recommend anybody doing that.
Yes, exactly. We don't recommend anybody doing any kind of fraud.
Yes. And by doing so, you won't be able to work with any kinds of immigration attorney because people don't want to take these kind of cases.
Exactly. Nobody wants to take people who have fake evidence.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jocabed, for these amazing presentations and also Q&A sessions that you presented to our audiences. And everybody, if you're interested in any of these options, if you're not selected by H1B, feel free to contact us or Jocabed. And thanks everybody for attending to our session. And until next time, thank you so much, Jocabed. And thanks everybody for attending.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll keep in touch.